All right, and we have the honor of sitting down with Eric O'Neill. Really, really looking forward to this. Eric is the author of Gray Day. He's a former FBI. He's got a ton of current research in AI and a new book in 2025 on that topic coming out. Title is in flux at this point, so we won't mention that. But Eric, thank you so much for jumping on with us.
Perry, Mason, it is great to be here.
Why don't we just jump into Gray Day? So that's the book that people can pick up right now. I want to understand the backstory because I think that that's going to give people a really good understanding of who you are and where your mind has been and where your talent lies, and then kind of sling us into the 2025 project.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Gray Day is a book about how I went undercover. It's through a first-person narrative, so you see the undercover investigation through my eyes, to catch Robert Hanssen, who was arguably the most damaging spy in U.S. history. We're still repairing the damage many years later. And it was the most unique case the FBI has ever run. I was asked to go undercover in FBI headquarters to catch a spy that the entire intelligence community had been hunting for over 22 years. He was the top mole for the Soviet Union and then the Russian Federation. He lasted so long, he survived the collapse of the Soviet Union for over 2 decades. That's 22 years of his 25-year career in the FBI. He was a veteran FBI agent. At one point, was a supervisory special agent and was the top Russian analyst. And of course, he had sold secrets to Russia. And at one point, he was even asked to catch himself. So this was a pretty difficult ask to go undercover as myself in FBI headquarters with only a handful of people in the entire building knowing that this case was happening, and have to not only determine the information that would strike that nail that we knew this guy was the spy we were after, this legendary spy only known as Gray Suit, and then find a smoking gun that would lead to his arrest. So we would have a slam dunk case for the Justice Department to make sure that he was prosecuted.
That is so cool. That is, when I told my wife that I was like, I'm going to speak with a former FBI agent. And I didn't expect to speak with the former FBI agent involved in like a heist movie in real life, like a real, that's like real spy movie stuff that you lived through.
Well, it was a complicated case. And the problem with the case was that Robert Hanssen wasn't just the most damaging spy in U.S. history. I mean, he had given secrets to the Soviet Union during the height of the Cold War, including our nuclear warfare plan. And that's not a good thing for them to have if that ever happened. Undercover operations, undercover operatives, huge billion-dollar plans that we had that he had given up. And it wasn't quite what he did that's important, especially for your audience, but how he did it. He was also our first cyber spy. He had stolen information from computer systems in the FBI that were never built to defend for decades. And he even was, I think, one of the first spies of his magnitude to drop data to the Russians. He dropped floppy disks.
Man.
And back in the day, it was the big 5 1/4, and then he went to the 3 1/2, and I think we caught him before he could move to thumb drives. And now, all cyber attacks and cyber espionage are internet-based penetrations and spear phishing. But back then, he would wrap those floppy disks in a trash bag and seal it with packing tape and put it under a bridge in Foxstone Park in Vienna, Virginia. And then the intelligence officer would leave the embassy and do this whole long 8-hour surveillance detection run, and then clandestinely pick up the drop when he didn't think he had surveillance on him. And it was it's the perfect combination of the old cloak and dagger espionage and today's cyber espionage, and he is right on the wave of that cardinal change in how not only cyber espionage but cyber crime has evolved. And that is the essence of the book Gray Day.
I don't want to derail, but I'm so curious, because when we get figures like this in history, these great, I don't want to say great, but like these infamous spies, we conjure to mind all sorts of personality traits that we ascribe to them. And you actually knew this person. So if you what was he like IRL, just as a person? Was he particularly like a genius or anything like that? Or was he just a guy?
He was brilliant. He was one of the top analysts in the FBI. He was a spy hunter. So I had to go undercover to catch someone who was very highly trained to catch somebody who's trying to catch him. He the sad thing is he had brilliant ideas for how we can improve cybersecurity in the FBI. And the trap for Hanssen was that the FBI built a brand new division called the Information Assurance Section, which, hey, this is back in 2000, 2001. Today, that means cybersecurity. So they put him in charge of building cybersecurity for the FBI, knowing that he was, the worst threat actor in the FBI, exploiting computer systems, to give him access to data so he could spy and we could catch him red-handed. And the only other person standing between him and getting away with it was me. And I was never trained to do this, trained to do this. I just happened to be the undercover operative who knew how to catch a spy and turn on a computer.
So they had him building his own honeypot, essentially. That's crazy.
Yeah, in a way. And so to go into some of his personality traits, because they were critical to the case, I was putting together a psychological profile. He was a huge narcissist. He's genius, narcissist. He was never wrong, disliked authority, didn't like anyone above him in the chain of command. He was also one of the most horrible bosses on earth. He was rough and brash, and he could, curse you out for dropping a pencil. And he was savvy. I could tell that he was always trying to determine whether he was under investigation. And so, in my marching orders were, 1, don't screw up. That was the first and most important thing. Sell this. Make him feel like it's true. Don't screw up. Because everybody thought if there was a point of failure, it was going to be me. So, going in, there was always also a ton of pressure. And then number 2, confirm he's the spy we've been after for 22 years. It's like, well, you guys couldn't catch him for 22 years. What am I supposed to do? And then 3, find a smoking gun so we have an airtight case for the Justice Department. And how is anyone supposed to do that? But
and you were like 25, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, how early in your career were you?
I was 26, 27. I was look, once upon a time, people, ran kingdoms at that age. So I can't say.
Right.
But today, in today's society, that's pretty young.
Yeah.
To work a case of that magnitude. But look, the FBI excels at finding the right person for the right job, and it just turns out I didn't know it, but I was that right person.
So what was your story? How did you get in with him?
Well, I was just assigned to him. I was an undercover operative called a ghost.
Mm-hmm.
So my job was high-level surveillance, investigations of terrorists and spies, all mostly around the United States capital, Washington, D.C., everywhere from Baltimore down to Richmond. And we would follow and investigate these high-profile targets. And back in the late 90s, I decided that it was nonsensical to handwrite surveillance logs and then hand in the signed paper to analysts who would then literally lay it all out on a table and try to make links. I mean, that seems silly to someone who was in law school at the time and using things like Lexis and Westlaw, these powerful databases. And I thought, I'll just write a database. And so I started on my own time writing a database that did predictive analysis. And the idea being that, look, we follow these Russians for decades, and they have to plan their signals and dead drops and meets and signs of life and all that years in advance. It's all pre-planned, especially with their assets. So I figured that if we could upload all of that into even a basic database that just predicts time and location, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we look at everywhere they've been in the past, we can predict where they're going to be in the future. And it worked. The problem is that in the FBI, when you do anything outside of the norm, this is government, period. You get notoriety, right? You don't get a lot of kudos or an award. But it was enough to sell to Hanssen that this guy's a maverick. He's kind of like you. He wrote this whole program on his own. He's in law school. He's looking for a way not to have to do, overnight surveillance and late night surveillance, and keeps missing school and complaining. And it sold well.
Yeah.
I can see how that would make total sense. That's so, yeah. Also, that's cool to make that. Was it, you said it was early 90s that you were working on this database? Just from like a technical perspective.
Mid-90s, yeah. I used Microsoft Access because it was free.
Really?
Yeah, there you go.
Wicked.
It was free, and it was in the squad team computer. It was on the squad computer. And so I really, I'd never used Access before. I just taught myself how to use it and built it. And the trick was, in order to get it to work, everybody had to type their surveillance logs in Word, and then it could upload directly in, and it would keyword search and pull all the data we needed from each log.
And then just do a whole bunch of SQL joins and everything else.
It was agonizing to write.
Yeah, I bet. But at the time, that's a huge boon, right? And then also, that's wicked cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. So you've seen, of course, everything. I mean, you were just talking about the transition from floppy disk to smaller floppy disk to CD-ROM, thumb drive, and then now SAS. And what has the past few years been like for you as you've watched the increased popularity and sophistication of AI, and even, I guess, more specifically, things like deepfakes and generative AI being used for disinformation and for scams?
Yeah, absolutely. Cybercrime was already a mad sprint for strategists and threat hunters and everyone in cybersecurity to try to keep up with them. Mm-hmm. Because they have not only organized into these large gangs, or I like to call them syndicates, because I want people to elevate their thinking of just how sophisticated the new cybercrime threat actors are, right? They have also, as you alluded to, used AI to scale their operations, to now write novel code, to repair and correct the biggest problem they had, which was the lack of grammar and spelling and the ability to write persuasively. And now the AI writes it all for them. So spear phishing has increased exponentially in its success as a vector of attack. But more than that, AI now can do all of the work for them, just like it does for a lot of people in, good and honest business. AI programs never sleep, so they can continually scan and persist on networks to try to find that flaw, that unpatched program or third-party application that's connected. It can continually launch attacks against people using texts and emails just to try to find that one little hook. It's writing novel code. Just a few months ago, people were saying, AI is okay at writing code, but you have to do a lot of work. Give it a month, it's going to be better than humans. And it's funny because my son wants to go into robotics and he's coding, and I'm wondering if by the time he graduates high school, it's all going to be prompt engineering. I mean, do you want to sit there for, a day and code, or do you want to just ask the AI to do it and just quickly scan it and see if the code's right?
And if it isn't, feed it back in and ask it what went wrong.
AI is already, it passed the Wharton MBA. It is, there was a study where AI was better at predicting infectious disease than doctors. It had like a 78% rate, and the patients also remarked that they preferred to speak to the AI than the doctor. It had better bedside manner. I mean,
I didn't catch that detail.
It's
really
changing law. It's changing. It's changing the world. I think, it's not just the cybercrime that we have to worry about, because it's being exploited and used. And of course, cybersecurity is racing to beat it. There's good AI and bad AI, but it is also changing generations. And I do worry quite a bit. I have, 2 teenagers and an 11-year-old. I worry quite a bit about how the use of AI in education is, sort of causing a forced laziness. In my new book, which currently, Perry, is titled The Invisible Threat. It may not end up being The Invisible Threat, but it will be Eric O'Neill's new book, and it's highly anticipated. But I
there's
have
a link
chapter
to your website in the show notes, so whatever updates, listeners can go there and see what's up.
I have a chapter all about AI and impersonation attacks, and and also a chapter about exploitation, right? Because I'm talking about how spies do what they do, how cyber criminals who have learned from the spies do what they do just by modeling them, and what we can do to stop them, all in the same fun storytelling, thrilling storytelling that I used in Gray Day. But in the chapter of impersonation exploitation, I also talk about how AI will change generations. And I start by saying, what happens when there's no blank pages? Now think about this for a second. In my day, it was funny, my editor said it wasn't 10 years ago that this happened, more like, and so I had to change it to, in my day, as a firm Gen Xer, when you received an assignment to write an essay in school, you would pull out a sheet of loose leaf and a number 2 pencil and get to work. And the first, most agonizing moment where you stare at a blank page and you have to think of how to start the essay is the most magical. because that is where your mind has to start from nothing and create. That is the essence of American ingenuity, of humanity's ingenuity, right?
Right.
Is that moment where you go from nothing to just dreaming to creation. But when a whole generation starts by just prompting ChatGPT to generate for them, there's no creation. It's regurgitation. It's something that's already been done, that the large language model has learned, and then is spitting out maybe in a new and unique way based on your prompt, but it's still the old being repurposed.
Yeah.
And so what happens when there's no blank pages? What happens when we have a generation of people who don't create or dream, they prompt? And I think there's a problem there.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, but it's interesting the way you phrase that. You said that when you have the paper out and you have your pencil or your pen, or you're looking at the blinking cursor, you mentioned it as the most magical moment, which it is, because you're creating out of nothing, or you're creating out of your own thoughts. At the same time as the person who's staring at the blank page, it can feel like the most agonizing moment, because it's like,
I'm an author. I
how
get
do I
that.
even
I
start
feel it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if there are good and healthy ways that we can teach our kids to use the tools that are in front of them in ways that are not mentally lazy, but are ways that foster the creativity that we're hoping gets put on the page the rest of the time.
Yeah, and I think you do it the same way. Maybe it's the same way that you approach mathematics. I mean, you don't start by handing the kid a calculator.
Yeah.
Right.
You start with 2 + 2 = and they have to figure it out, right? If you hand them a calculator, they're never going to make those connections they need to make in order to figure the advanced math, where you need a calculator. Otherwise, you're just punishing them, right?
Right.
Also, we need more boredom. Technology in itself has just killed boredom. And boredom's important. A little bit of boredom is where your mind's always working. Your mind wants to have fun. That's all it wants to do. It just wants to have fun. Your mind is like the biggest partier on earth. It just wants to have fun. And if you're bored, it's just going to start going to work. It's going to start dreaming. It's going to start thinking of things. I make some of the best connections when I'm in the backyard just mowing my lawn, because it's the most boring, repetitive, pushing it around. And I still mow my own lawn. I don't need to, but it's like, why pay to go to CrossFit when you could just go mow your lawn? It's the same kind of work, right?
Nice.
And I just put on music, and as I'm doing these circles, they get, these concentric circles, they get smaller and smaller as I get toward the center of the lawn. I start thinking about things. And, there's those moments you need in order to, and then sometimes I got to stop and grab my phone and pull out the notes app and type really quickly before I lose it, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's that default mode network, right, that you enter, where you're just not ruminating, but coming up with your own novel thoughts and entertaining ideas as they enter your head. I do think that is something that we are missing largely culturally now, with the attention economy, algorithmically fed stuff that you can just constantly distract your brain with.
It's doom scrolling.
Yeah, I'm a little bit hesitant to put that diametrically opposed to the idea of creativity, because I do think there's a part of me, and maybe it's just the optimist in me, that wants to think that human creativity will win out, and that this is forcing us to have a lot of conversations about how we define the creative process. Because in some cases, the creative process can be curation. For example, something I do a lot is sound design, and I'm not foleying and recording every zip, zap, zop I put together, but I'm collaging things other people have made. And so I think that part of the biggest challenge of AI really is that we're forced to have all of these conversations to redefine human value in so many domains that I think we kind of have to slice them off vertically to think about, okay, AI in education, AI in art, AI in this.
Right.
But I think I'm hesitant to think that human creativity will be stifled, or that kids will not want to learn, because I think curiosity is always there and very human. And if we reevaluate our educational systems to be less based on standardized tests or regurgitation, that might be a better approach. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on all of that, I guess.
I'm not saying that AI is a bad thing. I'm saying that, I use it. It's a tool. It fascinates me, and I love it. I keep finding something new and cool and different that pops up. There are 15,000 companies right now that are building AI applications. There are over 100,000 AI apps, something like that. It's crazy. I mean, there's an app for like that old saying, there's an app for that. There is. There's an AI app for everything.
There's an AI.
And most of it is free. You know, it's throttled. It says, oh, you've used all your credits for the day. Okay, I'll come back tomorrow. Or I'll go to one of the other hundreds of them.
Time to make a Gmail.
But I mean, in that way, it has opened up for people. And this is, Mason, I'm getting to what you're saying. It has opened up new avenues for creation for people, which I think is wonderful. There was already an explosion of content creators who used to take a day, and now they can do it in 2-3 minutes. There will be whole economies in doing this. I think that by the time my son, who is a freshman, is in college, there will be classes, like real serious classes in prompt engineering. That may be even more critical than some of the programming that he's doing. So I'm with you there. I just think that, especially for young kids, just as you know, we just have their children, no phone until 14. There is a time for technology, and there's a time to hold off, right?
Yeah.
Because you still have to make those mental connections before you dive into the deep end. And and we need a little bit more of that.
I definitely see like an interesting spectrum there, because I'm kind of like you. I have to schedule no input time almost on my calendar, to where it's like I don't have earbuds in, I'm not listening to a podcast, I'm not watching a video, because some of my biggest connections between everything that I've taken in happen when my mind has nothing else to do other than to try to figure out how to assimilate everything.
Yeah, that's you mowing your lawn.
Exactly. It's for me, it's like driving around the block, or, you know, going and doing errands.
Right.
And that's like where I end up taking a lot of notes and sending them to myself to like figure out like what do I do with those later. At the same time, I think that it's interesting to figure out where the new boundaries and parameters are that put us in whatever creative box we have to live in. Because when we have unbounded freedom, we almost hit this analysis paralysis thing. It's like I can do anything I want, but as soon as we realize the limitations of the tool set that we have, now we have to figure out the creative ways to solve for those limitations. And that opens up a whole new realm of creativity. And I think that when it comes to like all the different tools, the interesting place of vertigo that we get in is that everything is changing and improving so fast that the boundary that we had just adapted to becomes no longer there. But at the same time, we're still learning all these interesting ways to combine things and to create new things that maybe we didn't even know was possible a while back. The really, really interesting thing is that people that have creativity, regardless of the tool set, will be the ones that flourish. People that have ingenuity and will push through and have grit will be the ones that flourish, whether they're using AI or whether they're not, because they're going to be the ones that like take all the little tinker toys in front of them and figure out the interesting way to combine those.
And then there's the dark side. Right?
Yeah.
That's all nice, but then there's the dark side.
Yes.
Literally the dark web, right? And there, you know, that old saying, here there be monsters. And dark web cyber criminals of all sizes and stripes and expertise and ingenuity are using AI to create some of the most destructive scams, the most disgusting content. Just starting at the base level, you know, there's a massive child pornography marketplaces. And in fact, some analysis of the dark web, in that, you know, people go and figure out, they get the Tor browser and figure out how to go on the dark web. You know, the #1 search is child pornography for people who are going on the dark web and searching. Yeah.
Wow.
And
gosh,
a lot of it now, it's all AI generated, because you can get AI to generate it and you don't have to. I don't even know how you find a child to do. I mean, it's mind-bogglingly horrible, you know. And then take it to a different level. The biggest scam today, right now, is cryptocurrency scams, where it's cryptocurrency investment scams. You know, pig butchering is one of those, and now, you know, and it's sort of a evolution of romance fraud. I call them all impersonation scams or impersonation attacks, where you are pretending to be someone that gains the trust of somebody else by learning about them and creating this perfect avatar. AI's made this so much easier. because now you can use AI avatars. You can use AI to clone a voice. You can not be who you sound like. You can speak in any language you want and be incredibly persuasive. You got to be careful when you're on dating apps because you don't know whether you're talking to a person or AI.
And it's so easy to do
and
now.
It's easy.
That's like the speed at which you can do it, and the effort it takes is nothing. So that's terrifying.
I used to say it takes 5 minutes and $5. Now it doesn't even take $5.
Yeah, for real.
It's all free, right?
Yeah.
So the AI is being used, and particularly in AI and impersonation attacks and confidence schemes, to defraud people of millions. I mean, you saw what happened to, I think arguably the top architecture design company on earth. I mean, these are the guys who designed the Sydney Opera House. They were caught up in a very sophisticated AI-based impersonation scheme where a finance worker in Hong Kong, in the Hong Kong branch, or a UK company, was asked to join a Zoom meeting by the CFO, like his boss's boss from the UK.
Yeah.
It was an email that said, join a Zoom meeting, not, send a wire, but join a Zoom meeting. He jumped on the Zoom meeting. There's the CFO and 2 people he recognizes from finance and 2 he doesn't. And everyone introduces themselves. He learns that the 2 people he doesn't know are partners in this new, very top secret venture. And he needs to start sending money. And then the emails from the CFO start saying send wires, and they direct him to send. And over the next 2 weeks, he sends 15 wires for $25 million right into a cybercrime group's pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And it's gone. Yeah. And this is happening more and more and more.
Wow. When was that? I didn't see that story.
This
when did that
happened last
happen?
year.
Yeah.
No way. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
There are companies have been attacked where they clone the voice of the CEO and make a phone call. I need this done right away. Where they're cloning using a very precision avatar. I mean, when you're looking in your screen and you're looking at all the little boxes, I mean, it's clever to have all those people instead of just having the CFO, right? Because the more boxes, the smaller they are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's blurry, and deepfakes are getting just more and more hyper-realistic. Yeah.
And you're mentally prepared to excuse any inconsistencies because we've all gotten used to the inconsistencies of video conferencing, like glitches,
Exactly.
or like stuff looks weird. Oh, that's just Zoom. It's not a big deal. It's clever exploitation of all of these very human weaknesses at a scale we have never, ever seen before.
Or even like if you pre-recorded some of that, which if I have read everything related to the case that you mentioned correctly, that it looks like a lot of that was pre-orchestrated, pre-recorded, and he was basically kind of in this thing that was all orchestrated around him. And then because of the more honor-based culture, he wouldn't necessarily participate in that conversation. He would then get off and be sent those notes that you mentioned to just execute the thing.
The way that it happened was he joined, and then the CFO says, "Thank you all for joining. I'd like everyone to introduce themselves." And each avatar introduces themselves. The only real person was him.
Yeah.
And he introduces himself, and then it's abruptly cut. And then he starts getting emails directing him to do right.
Which that makes a lot of sense.
Which is really clever. I mean, it's really clever. Unless you've trained your workforce for this, they're not going to. I mean, they're told, okay, I will never ask you in an email to send a wire, right? Or, it has to be confirmation from 2 people. But you know what? Even confirmation in the old training that we used to do was, you would have to call the CFO directly. Right? Well, now if they intercept that and they've cloned the voice, you can use AI deepfakes to do a lot of things. I mean, just in the election, all the nuttiness that happened there. I mean, there were AI voice deepfakes. There was in New Hampshire, there was a deepfake of Biden telling people not to vote. And even saying things like malarkey and whatever, using his right. And and there were pictures that were surfaced of Trump, in an orange jumpsuit, right around when they said he was going to be arrested. And people were saying, was he arrested? What happened?
Yeah.
I mean, there's just the hijinks in politics and business and in our lives. I've said in my new book, I say, trust is now an uncommon commodity. It is less common to find trust than to out in the wild than to see all these deepfakes. And that the goal of cybersecurity now is to restore trust. That's it. It used to be protect data, protect information, secure networks. Now it's really restore trust, because you can't even trust what you see on your network.
That's a really good way to kind of hit this last question because I see we've hit the 30-minute mark.
No worries.
If you're going to give advice to normal people, not cybersecurity pros, not anybody with a huge technical background, how do we live in this age where we can no longer discern between what's real and what's fake when it's online? What are your top tips there?
Exactly. And that is the essence. You just boiled down the essence of my new book, which is the first part of the book is Think Like a Spy, all the ways that we're getting attacked so you recognize it. You have to educate yourself. You have to know how these attacks are coming. The second part is Act Like a Spy Hunter. You got to put yourself in that mindset. You need to look at every engagement online as a potential threat. You don't blindly trust. You trust nothing, verify everything. And you're also giving yourself the best position to succeed. So as a consumer, the top things you can do are be very careful what you do in email. I say you have to be an email archaeologist. It's still the #1 vector of attack.
Yeah.
And when I say email archaeologist, I don't mean, lazily, like quietly over the day dusting a dinosaur bone. I'm like whip, fedora, like going through the cave, like stay out of the light, dodging the spears. You need to think of email that way because it is dangerous. So you're very careful on what you're doing in email. You're turning on multi-factor authentication everywhere. And in today, it's not enough just to have a text. You need to be using an authenticator app, and you need to be something more than a password, because just computers alone today are strong enough to crunch passwords. Now, in order to stop just password cracking by these fast computer systems, you need to have 12 characters with many different combinations of uppercases and lower cases and unique symbols. No one has that in numbers. So you always have to have something plus the password. And then finally, you have to be very careful about what you are doing online, who you're talking to online. You have to always verify every interaction online to look for the scam, because it could be that person on the dating app could be a fake. The email telling you to do something could be fake. I've seen cases from friends who, get these phone calls from a friend or a family member saying, I'm in Mexico. I was on vacation. My hotel room got ransacked, and I just need you to wire me $1,000 so I can buy a ticket home, and I can pay the hotel, and I can, get my stuff, and all these things. And they're talking to their friend, right?
Yeah.
But it's really just a deepfake. So you have to pause, not get caught in the pressure situation, but be aware. And it's more about, to boil it all down, it's really your mindset is not to blindly trust online. Now, when you're with your friends, when you're actually talking to them, when you're face to face, sure. But when you're online, it is so easy to insert yourself and become that imposter that you have to be very careful.
Yeah, I love that. Is there something, because this is all fairly bleak when you think about the nature of trust, and the liar's dividend and everything else, it's, going to be kind of this world that we're living in. Where do you see little bits of hope?
Well, there's plenty of hope. There's technology in the hands of the bad guys, but hands of the good guys as well. There is technology that is protecting against a lot of these attacks. For example, there's a research unit in NYU that is putting together applications that would run in the background on Riverside, which we're using to record now, in Zoom and on FaceTime, that would identify whether what you're seeing or hearing is a deepfake. It would just happen. It would be happening in the background. You'd get an alert. This is not real, or 90% not human, right? I think that's something we need. There are many different companies who are trying to put that together. I think in the future that as we spend more time using technology as our first medium of communication, right? I mean, nobody goes to an office anymore. No one really wants to. And even if you do go to an office, half the workforce is dispersed anyways. We bought this, and this is where we're going. This is the future, right? Is internet first communication. We need to create the protections within the technology that identify all the scams. And that's happening. People are getting smarter. People are getting savvy. One of the reasons that I do what I do is to help people think this way, to do my little part to make the world safe from cyber attacks. And And I think a lot more of that could be very helpful.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us. Really, really looking forward to the new book. And you've lived an incredible life, and looking forward to seeing what you do next.
Yeah, I need to pick up a copy of Gray Day
and read
that right now. This is such a fun story, too. Thank you so much, Eric.
Thanks, Mason. It was great to be on the show and appreciate our conversation.